Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. It's great having you. It's really nice to see a lot of people coming in. Um, I don't see any reason why we cannot get started. Today, we're going to be talking about the three biggest challenges to SQL Server monitoring. There's a lot to talk about here, quite a lot. I know it only says three, but there's a lot of detail in those three, so we're going to get started. My name is Grant Fritchey. I work for Redgate Software, a fantastic organization. This is my contact information at Redgate. If you've got questions after today, please get in touch with me. It's grant.fritchey@redgate.com. I will be glad to try to answer any questions I can around monitoring, DevOps, GDPR, all kinds of fun stuff. And I'm here to help out. I've got over 30 years now in the business. That gray hair has been earned, and I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and that's about all I have to say about that. James, you guys want to introduce yourself, please?
Way to top me there, Grant. I don't have quite so much to say about myself, but my name's James King. I'm one of the account executives at Redgate Software, also one of the monitoring specialists. So it's really good for me to come on here and talk about this stuff, and exciting to do it with Grant. I've got over 7 years experience at Redgate. Majority of that's been working with the monitoring tools and teams. As I said, not quite as much there as maybe Grant, but hopefully enough. And again, like I said, please do feel free to get in contact with any questions.
Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out after today. Speaking of questions, if questions come up during the day, there is a questions pane on the GoToWebinar interface that you have there. Type any questions you have into that questions thing, and we will try to answer them either as we go along or towards the end of the session. Depending on the questions, if there's stuff going on that we need to clarify, we will. But other than that, we're going to get going on the webinar. Cool. All right, so Redgate put together a survey, and we sent it out to a very large number of people, and we've got a good number of respondents, and basically we want to share that information with you guys. It is how we are defining the top challenges of monitoring. It's not so much I'm sitting here and telling you what the challenges are, or James is going to tell you what the challenges are. You guys told us what challenges you are facing now in terms of monitoring your databases, monitoring SQL Server and SQL Server instances. And the fact is that we wanted to make decisions on data, based on data, not simply based on my knowledge or my understandings or anyone else's. We wanted to get an idea of how you guys are doing your monitoring. Where are you doing your monitoring? How big are your systems? How many systems do you have? All these kinds of information are going to drive our ability to help you do these processes, and having an understanding of what your challenges are and the way you're facing and dealing with the challenges facing you gives us a lot of information. Frankly, we are doing our best to share that back with you so that we're not going to sit on it and hide it and not let anyone else see it. We're just going to expose it and show it to you guys and talk about where you guys are having problems and hopefully how we can help. So, James.
So we had a large number of people take part, as Grant said, and across these 626 respondents, there was an average of 12 years working with SQL Server. So, a lot of experience there. Nothing too shocking in the sense we had 30% of the people were developers, another 26% were DBAs. I probably would expect that to be the other way around. And we seem to have every flavor in between, with some DB architects, heads of IT, and even some C-level execs. So, really good cross-section there of people answering these questions. 67% were in the EMEA region, so obviously that's the largest sort of respondents. Again, that kind of corresponds with our market, and 26% in EMEA and 7% in APAC. With regards to the sectors, I mean, this is again a really good cross section. There's no real leading thing. Obviously, technology out there and 17% and finance at 14%. That's kind of to be expected. But I think it's fair to say we've got a really good breadth of different people from different sectors and in different parts of the world answering this.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. I'm really excited that we got some C-level stuff in there, and just the fact that it's a good representative globally, I think makes a big difference in the information that we're presenting. So what are your three biggest challenges? Well, I mean, I'll let you guys read the slide, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Um, you guys are moving to the cloud. Everybody's starting to, right? It's this concept that oh, we will never move to the cloud. Well, there's a lot of people moving to the cloud, and the fact is, it's challenging. There's stuff going on there. We're gonna talk about that in some detail. Um, the other thing is that we are doing more. We've got more servers, we've got more instances, we've got more databases, and they're moving quickly. Um, so the more aspect of what we do is growing more. And finally, um, privacy and protection, right? Ensuring data security, ensuring compliance, with the compliance regime moving the way it is. There's a lot of challenges there. So frankly, I'm both excited and informed by this. I'm excited because it actually corresponds with my understanding of what was going on in the industry. I think this is more or less what I expected to see. But I'm also excited because we've gotten a lot of detail on this, and so we're going to share some of it with you guys, so you get some understanding of how these challenges are hitting you and how we can help you address these challenges in a better way. So challenge number one, like I said, you guys are starting to move to the cloud, right? It's happening. People are moving in whole, in part, they're starting in the cloud, whatever, however they're doing it. People are absolutely beginning to move to the cloud, whether it's AWS, Google, Azure, it's coming, and let's talk about it. So this is straight from the survey. Um, our survey said that the single biggest challenge coming this year, number one, right? This is number one. And the biggest one is going to the cloud. Now, it was really interesting to me, the distribution of it. Now, probably we've got a bit of a bias towards Microsoft and therefore there's a bit of a bias towards Azure, and you'll see 47% is Azure and 46% is AWS. And so that split that you do see is Azure SQL Database, managed instances. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm misreading the slide. I'm so sorry. It's 30% Azure SQL Database. It's 17% managed instances, and then the 11% AWS is the AWS like Redshift and all that stuff. The 35% is either AWS or Azure virtual machines. So I'm excited by the fact that 47% of you guys are moving to platform as a service offerings. Oh, and by the way, Oracle's in there at 7%. Um,
Get
hey,
that in there.
we got to mention them, right? There's Oracle. Um, I'm excited that you guys are moving to platform as a service offerings. Those things are very, very good. They're doing a lot of things for us. Just speaking only for myself, I was recently doing testing with the automated indexing that's available in Azure SQL Database, and it's amazing. Just and add to that the ability to get backups and DBCC checks and all these other things, and it's just all great. But here's the fun bit: monitoring doesn't go away. Moving all of your stuff over there is great. Moving into managed instances or moving into VMs, it's all awesome. But there's still going to be pain, right? There's just absolutely pain point. First up, monitoring platforms as a service is different. It's not the same. You're not going to be measuring, how many CPU am I using? You've got this thing called DTU, although there is a new mechanism in Azure. Um, that's going to allow us to use a simulation of CPU and other stuff, but it's just not the same. You're not looking at the resources in the same way. It's virtualization taken to a whole new level. Also, speaking of virtualization, the fact of having a hosted virtual server, it's not the same as when you're hosting it locally. Locally, you've still got the ability, whether or not your VM managers let you have it or not, you still have the ability to get down and take a look at the hardware. It's there, it's available to you. You can get access to it. If you really need it, you can get it. When we're talking about moving to the cloud, we're talking about cloud hosted, those VMs, that hardware is not yours, right? It's not accessible. You don't get to see it. And so it's going to change the way we're monitoring, and it's going to change the stuff that we can monitor, and it's going to change the things that we care about in terms of monitoring. Yeah, the classic, are things online or not? That doesn't change. The classic, how long did my query take to run? That doesn't change. But some of the details behind those things absolutely are shifting and changing. And some of the information you're going to want to look at is shifting and changing. When we couple that with the fact that most of us, not all of us, but most of us are moving into a hybrid situation online, we are not talking about everyone's going 100% to the cloud. You're not. You're definitely going to still have servers locally. You're still going to have servers managed within your own data center, or maybe even underneath your desk. Whatever it is, there's going to be some stuff in the cloud and there's going to be some stuff local, and that adds an additional wrinkle to the whole monitoring aspect. Where is this server? Does it matter that it's on the cloud? Does it matter that it's under my desk? Further, there's challenges around security, because access and security are different in the cloud than they are locally, and your ability to manage them are just as high as they are locally, but they are different. And differences mean extra work, extra challenges, extra things we're going to have to do. So these are the pain points. This is the information that you guys have told us. Why is going to the cloud number one? This is it. 4 items, right? Monitoring platform as a service, monitoring the VMs, hybrid estate, and the difficulty of accessing it. So how do we solve that? All right, let's talk about how do we solve that. First up, we need to support having a hybrid mechanism. That's just step one. We know we're going to be in a hybrid scenario, so let's set up so that we can monitor in a hybrid way. Let's not just monitor Azure in one place and monitor our local SQL Server instances in another. Let's set up a mechanism that allows us to monitor both in a combined fashion, in a simple and clear fashion. We know what's what, and we know where it's coming from. Also, we need to have those PaaS, that platform as a service metrics, as part of our monitoring. So we're going to build that stuff in. We're going to capture data. We're going to have that information available to us and make it a part of our fundamental monitoring. And we're going to ensure that however we're doing our monitoring, that we ensure that it knows that I'm connected to a PaaS instance in this case versus a non-PaaS instance, and capture those same metrics. Speaking of which, if we're looking at virtual machines, we're connecting up to the virtual machines in a way that allows us to capture that information, that we can see what's going on inside the VMs, and see some of the virtual machine metrics that are exposed through Azure, through AWS, through Google. And those things will let us see what's happening on our servers. And then finally, we're going to have to set up hybrid security. Now that's labor, right? There's no getting away from the fact that that's going to be some labor. You've got to be able to set up virtualized security, a secondary Active Directory between what's local and what's out there on the cloud, and that's going to be some work. And frankly, if you're doing multiple cloud environments, it gets even harder. So if you've got some of your stuff's on AWS, some of your stuff's on Azure, and believe me, a lot of people do it that way for good reasons and bad, that's going to add additional pain to what we do. So all of these things are going on and all of these things are happening. But hey, guess what? Redgate is here to help. We are here to try to pitch in and let you know what's going on. James is going to take over at this point and talk to us about what is available from Redgate software in terms of helping you move to the cloud.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Hopefully you can see my screen again now. So as Grant mentioned, obviously people moving to a hybrid environment is something that it's not a surprise to me, to be honest. A lot of my customers I talk to is, they're going through this at the moment, and it's not just a case of moving everything into the cloud. As you said, it's also having different environments in different places. And one of the things we tried to do at Redgate is be on top of that. So we're already supporting the new managed instances. We've just brought out the Azure DB beta, so we've actually got a Azure DB here with the monitor. And the whole idea is to be able to have it all still on the single pane of glass. So as well as my on-prem servers, my stuff in my development environment and testing, I've also be able to add these additional areas that I want to be able to keep an eye on in the same way I'm keeping an eye on everything else. I mean, when you drill into these as well, you're getting the same level of detail you'd expect to see in the rest of the tool. So, I can see when my alerts are being raised. I can look across the window of time. I will just point out this is just a test system, so there's nothing too pretty going on here. But it gives you an idea at least of what sort of data we're collecting. And the other thing I think as well is probably worthwhile pointing out is we show, I mean, this is the top 5 queries. We actually show the top 50 queries now and the top 10 weights. But when you're thinking about doing stuff in Azure DB, I mean, literally, your queries are costing you money. I mean, the worse they are, and the least efficient queries are going to cost you more money than everything else. So, having the ability to be able to see what's going on here and see how they're executing and see if there's any ways to improve it or add indexes or remove duplicate indexes, I think is a massively powerful thing to have. This is still a work in progress. So, I mean, some of the stuff we obviously want to start adding in is some of the other data we collect. So, I mean, this is more general, but in our analysis and hopefully pulled into this, we're going to add things like the DTU. So, down at the bottom here we go. We've got some of SQL Azure metrics. So we've got DTU utilization, which obviously again is incredibly useful to see how much this is costing you. And then things like memory and CPU. So you can start to build a bigger picture of how the overall performance and trends over time are with the baselines. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of probably where we're at the moment. But this is, as I said, an evolution. I mean, this is something we're growing and building on, and we relish the feedback from people as to, what they think might be useful in this. The team's always talking to customers and seeing what would improve this. But hopefully, it's a step in the right direction to getting everything into one place and just managing it as if it's seamlessly all in the same environment, like there's nothing different.
Right, but we're already there. I mean, we've got the core monitoring in place for Azure SQL managed instance, Azure SQL database. We're sitting there waiting for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're up and running. We're just continuing to build on it as we go as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the good news.
yeah. I mean, the other nice thing as well is, I mean, even with regards to these hybrid estates, if you've got multiple domains, we've added the base monitors, so you can stick a base monitor in different domains, and again, just pulling it all into this one pane of glass. And I think that's the kind of real beauty here, is it's just not having to log into different areas. And I'm sure this, Grant, going into different places to find stuff. You just want it all there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, it's such a pain.
Yeah, great.
Cool beans. All right, let me show my screen back. Should be back up. All right. Challenge number 2. There's no questions or anything on that. Challenge number 2. You guys are doing more. Flat out. All right. There's a lot more going on. So let's get down to it. Here's where things get fun. Now, our survey says, and you guys can read through this and see all the information. 45% of you expect to see increase in usage of SQL Server this year. It's not simply that it's the most used platform. Almost half of you are going to use it even more. So it's, that it's just going, right? It's going and it's growing, and you're going to be seeing a lot more of it. The majority of you are deploying multiple times a week. So you've got more and more stuff coming out to your SQL Server instances. Interestingly enough, 18% of you are deploying daily. I'm thrilled that almost 20% are doing daily deployments, because that means they're doing small, incremental, safe deployments. They're not only are they moving fast and getting stuff out the door, but they're adding a layer of safety to their system by doing small incremental deployments rather than wait 6 weeks and do one giant one that, cross our fingers, it actually works. Let's see, on average, you guys are doing about 2 hours of monitoring a day. The manual processing that you guys do on your monitoring, you're doing maybe an hour looking at health and then an hour looking at issues. And we're going to try to get you some help to help out with that. Interestingly enough, most people are on small teams. The majority of people we talked to were on one to three people, working with 1 to 9 servers. But 40% of you have seen the size of your team increase over the last year. So it's coming. There's just more and more stuff going on. And shockingly enough, 27% of you are still doing completely hardcore by hand monitoring, looking through the error log, right? Walking through processing instead of setting up automation or getting stuff to do things, getting things to do things with. But a third of those are looking to switch to a tool in the next 12 months, which is really, really good, because it's just so hard to do without a tool. By the way, the manual monitoring is more common in small companies, with very, very, 1 to 50 employees. Developers who are responsible for databases are much more likely to do manual. DBAs have a tendency to use a tool or automate things themselves. Also, by the way, multiple deployments are more likely to use a paid tool. And let's see, that's about all the information I have to say about that. And that's what our survey said. You guys are doing more and more, faster and faster. So
that is encouraging. That is encouraging.
It is encouraging. I'm excited that there's so much automation going on. So now the problem is, it's not really a problem. It's just a fact. You guys are doing more. It's not like a challenge. You're doing more. It's not an issue. You've got more servers and more data under management this year than you had last year. That's not a challenge or an issue. That's a fact. It's just a done deal. You've got more stuff going on, more things you have to do. So how do we deal with the fact that we're doing more deployments to more servers with more data? Let's talk about that. And the fact is you need to start putting automation in. You need to automate monitoring. It cannot be a manual process. Manual processes do not scale. There's only one of you, right? There's only two of you. If you're on small teams, there's only 3 of you. You're not going to scale well. Even if there are 20 of you and you've got to manage 200, 300, 1,000 servers, you are not going to scale well. So you need to automate, because automate is your ability to scale. It absolutely is. Your ability to do more is incumbent upon your ability to automate your processes and automate your methodologies. Also, now that you're doing more and more things with more and more servers, you've got to track their server capacity. You cannot simply rely on the fact that, well, we've got auto grow on, so everything is fine. No, you've got auto grow on, therefore you could fill your hard drives faster, easier. you need to be sure that you're keeping an eye on capacity. Capacity planning is one of the things that frankly most of us spend a lot of time on, not because it's hard, but just because it's constantly shifting and constantly growing, and we don't want to run out of space, right? Running out of disk space hurts. It causes all kinds of outages, downtime, problems. But the same thing, if you run out of CPU, the same thing if you run out of memory, the same thing if you're running inside of Azure and you max out on DTUs, right? If you've hit the level of the threshold of what whatever service tier you're on can support, you're in trouble. And so you need to know when that's happening, when it's coming, not simply when it's arrived. So you also need a method for tracking your deployments. We need to know what changed. We need to know when it changed. Not because I want to stop change from going out the door, not because I want to slow things down, but simply because from a monitoring standpoint, something new was introduced to the system. And something new being introduced to the system is when things can go wrong. That query may have been tested to a fairly well, but we finally get it to production and it doesn't work that well, right? And it's going to show up in ways that we need to be able to know that something was deployed. If we don't know that something was deployed, we have problems. And finally, most importantly, when we're talking about these growing estates, more and more servers under management, more and more data under management, we have to be proactive, not reactive. We cannot simply go off the fact that, well, we got an alert on the server, let's go see what's wrong. We need to have mechanisms in place so we can see stuff coming. We can anticipate problems, not simply react to what's coming at us, like a freight train, because stuff will be coming at you like a freight train. It's just really down to the idea that we need to see what's coming. We need to have an idea of is that drive getting ready to fill? Stuff like that. So again, we are here to help. Let me turn this over to James. He's going to talk about it.
Thanks, Grant. I don't know where to begin with it because there's so much stuff I could literally spend an hour talking about this as it is. But I guess probably the main point there, as you said at the end, it's about how can we get people to be more proactive? And there was a time when well, I guess let's take it back to the beginning. So when you're looking at automating your monitoring, people are doing this manually are doing it wrong. They're probably not very happy people. They're probably not even watching because they're probably putting out fires somewhere right now, right? But there's a story to this. When you're doing things manually and you don't have this sort of overview, you're not able to kind of put the time into not just put out the fires, but prevent them from starting in the first place. And if you get that time in now and you start looking at the holistic overview of your estate, start getting alerting set up to tell you when there's a problem, and then you can move to the next step, which is letting you know before there's a problem even occurring, which means you can then give yourself time to go and do more interesting things and actually probably be a happier person in your job and add more value to what you're doing. It's true though, right? I mean, if you if you can add more value and build on what you're doing, then suddenly you're not just adding value in the sense of a tool, you're kind of driving things forward rather than constantly again fighting these fires. So I guess with Monitor, one of the first things we kind of set to do was how do we make everything really visible, really easy to kind of see what's happening. And this sort of a statewide view is kind of nice. This is on a small laptop screen that I've got on a 60-inch screen or something. You're going to get a lot more tiles there. But for some of those really large estates where you've got 400 instances or more, you can get a much wider view, and I believe the guys are actually working on another way to condense this and show even more data and even more servers for those really mammoth estates out there. But the idea is you can just see very quickly what's red. I mean, you can even switch it to sort of firefighting mode, or as I like to call it, boss mode, where everything just looks green and good. So when the boss walks around, they're happy. Although saying that, I think some people would argue if it's all green, then maybe they don't look like they're doing very much at all. So the tool is kind of built to really handle these large and growing estates, and also by getting it into control, something like monitoring, it means you've got capacity to take on larger estates in these new projects and kind of grow it as you're going along. And then when you do get to that sort of state and you start getting faster deployments, I mean, one of the things we've built into the tool with our SQL tool belts is this ability to track the deployments made through the DLM automation and through the compare tools and source control. As long as you've got a tool belt, effectively, it's giving you this symbol here. So again, this is just a test system. There's nothing sort of too pretty happening here. But if someone made a deployment and it goes out into my production and all of a sudden my CPU spikes, I can come in here very quickly and identify there's a symbol there showing a deployment. CPU spiked straight after. It wasn't there yesterday or wasn't there in previous days. I think I could pretty much nail that as being an issue caused by that deployment and go and sort that out. It's probably going to then go show my top queries as well, and there's going to be changes there that are going to be able to show me this issue's happened. So, from a deployment perspective, we're trying to be able to draw this whole DevOps story into the tool and just be able to see you a much more, wide overview from the beginning with the deployment right the way through to actually monitoring it into the production as well. With the alerting side of things as well, I mean, this is, again, a massive problem people have with big estates is they get too many alerts coming through. This happens with every tool, and it can be a bit hard to see the wood for the trees. So we've added this new thing in Grant where you can effectively link the alerts together. So rather than having hundreds and hundreds of rows, I mean, for example, deadlocks. I've got 10,000 deadlocks here. In previous times, you would have just had a list like this, and you would have to go through and try and find which one's what and what relates to the other. If I'm dealing with a big estate, I want to know what's my biggest problem, and can I deal with that first? And if I knock this 10,000 deadlocks out, I've only got 2,000 alerts. And okay, I'm not going to deal with those all in one day, but I'm already a big chunk of the way there to sorting out that problem and hopefully improving my performance across the estate and moving on to different things.
We need to talk about management if you've got 10,000 deadlocks, though. Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think someone's going to be having a word with someone with 10,000 deadlocks, right? But getting back to the productivity as well. I mean, or being more proactive. One of the things we added, you mentioned auto growth. So we've just brought this new alert in with database file usage, and what this does, if I click into one, is it shows you how the database file is filling up over time. So rather than getting to that awkward stage of you're in the middle of one of your busiest periods, and all of a sudden your database decides to go and do an auto growth, and everything grinds down to a halt. This way, I can see if this is going to happen either by advance, so I can say when it's 2 weeks away from actually having an auto growth. So raise an alert when it's, I don't know, let's say 7 days. I'm living a bit more dangerously. Or I can say when the disk space is less than a certain amount, or when the file space is more than a certain amount. So when it's at 90%, for example, alert me, tell me it's going to happen. That way, rather than trying to get the alert coming through telling me there's a problem, I'm actually dealing with the problem before it's even become a problem, and therefore being, again, proactive to my estate, enabling me to do more stuff and spend less time dealing with problems. So again, I think it's all about sort of adding value across this stuff and getting a wider view of the estate and being able to then give yourself more capacity to deal with issues before they become issues. And even actually just getting a wider view of what's on the installed versions. I mean, I think this actually jumps a little bit more into the third topic, but having an idea of what patches and what versions we're running across our estate, it's all information we hold in here. It's very easy to get to, and it's very easy to make decisions based on data that you've got at your fingertips, which actually also ties back into the first point. If you're going to move into the cloud, it's good to know what's going on with your servers, right? You want to have a good idea that everything's healthy and efficient, and how much is it going to cost me when I move it into the cloud? Well, at least if you can see how much CPU and how much memory you're using before you even start thinking about that, and is it as efficient as you can get it, then I think you're in a much better place to be able to take those projects on, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll hand back over to you, Grant, but
Okay.
hopefully that's kind of covered some of those points.
Oh yeah, I thought so. Let's see.
Right, I'll give you the screen.
By the way, we had a typo. It said replace proactive with reactive. We don't want to do that, guys. So I fixed the slide just so you guys can see it there. All right. So challenge number 3, again, this is from the survey that we took out with everyone, and the information you gave us is that data security, privacy protection, and compliance with the regulations is your 3rd biggest challenge this year. And interestingly enough, GDPR, there hasn't been any fines yet, right? It's not May 25th. We haven't seen anything coming down. But we've seen the average fine for a data breach is now $2.7 million. And there's been breach costs as high as $8.9 million. And that's just the penalties. That's not talking about actual costs to your organization in terms of trust, management, all those other kinds of things. But this is the 3rd biggest challenge this year is privacy, protection, and security. And for those who know what GDPR is, and shockingly enough, a lot of people don't, GDPR is very high on that list. I mean, it's generally the highest thing, depending on who you are and where you're at and what kind of data you manage. But the General Data Protection Regulation is coming. I'm sorry, General Data Protection Regulation is here. Enforcement is coming, and a lot of people are still working on that. Yeah, more than 50% of you say security is a daily responsibility, and that's great that more than half of you acknowledge that, but it's only just over half of you. There's a lot of you guys that are not yet on top of the fact that security is something you have to be doing. And frankly, the majority right now are still spending most of their time in a reactive mode, trying to catch up to what's going wrong on the servers. So where are the pain points? The government directives, it's getting harder, right? There's more government directives. I mean, we're not talking just GDPR, although GDPR is huge. We're talking about the PCI. We're talking about HIPAA. We're talking about the NIST 800-53, right? These things are coming. They are all directed at data privacy, data protection, security, and regulatory compliance for all of our data. All of these things are hitting us hard. There's a lot of labor involved in getting these things right. And so we're spending time in places, frankly, that we might not want to. I would rather spend more time query tuning, right? He talked about how we could save the company money by tuning queries in Azure. Well, heck, let's go spend our time doing that. But instead, we are spending a lot of time dealing with compliance and government regulations. And, like it or not, that's now a major piece of the job. We also, within the GDPR, it talks about availability, and data being available is defined, data being unavailable is defined as being a data breach. Now, we still don't know how that's going to be enforced, but it certainly suggests that we need to have availability reporting built into our systems. Also, real-time status. Where are things at right now? If you start getting reports on, on security and security leakings, we need to know what's happening. We cannot simply guess at where we're at. And finally, knowing what's changing. Who's introduced new releases? Where were they deployed from? What was deployed? What changes have occurred within the system? All of these things are inflicting pain on us. They are taking away our time that we could spend doing other things we'd have a lot more fun with. So what are we going to do? First off, we've got to work to put monitoring into our processing. Monitoring has to be a fundamental aspect of what we do and how we do it. As DBAs, as data professionals, as database developers, monitoring is not a separate thing. Monitoring is not a secondary thing. Monitoring is part of what we do. We need to have the ability to track our servers over time. It's so important to know when behavior changed. If you get a SQL injection attack, right, what queries were running, what happened, what other changes have come in to our system that would, make us vulnerable now when we weren't vulnerable before. Knowing what's happening on the systems and knowing how these systems are changing is a fundamental aspect of monitoring, but it's a fundamental aspect of getting us to so that we are in compliance with regulations, so we are in compliance with data privacy and data protection. And then finally, we need to be able to customize our stuff. Your alerts are going to be different than mine. Your ability to track certain behaviors of your system, your needs for tracking certain behaviors of your system are definitely going to be different than mine. And we need to be able to customize that and build it right into our full-on automated deployment mechanisms. So all of these things will help us address the security and privacy issues. And I think James is going to tell us a little bit about how Redgate can help out with that as soon as I can point at him. There it goes.
There we go.
Shockingly difficult that was.
It's never smooth, is it? It's never smooth. But yeah, I think GDPR is obviously a hot topic at the moment. I mean, all of this reflects the things I talk about with customers on a regular basis, and but I think we're all still kind of learning about what is going to be required and what is needed, and how we can really address the issues that come about with, compliance and regulations that are just, let's face it, getting stricter by the day. But one of the key things I think we can offer is just that awareness of what's happening with your estate. I mean, I think it's a bit like, you're sort of, I don't know if you had this in your sort of maths exams when you're younger, Grant, but, they always used to say it's not necessarily the answer, it's how you got there. And I think that sort of applies here to a degree. Being able to show that you're doing everything you can and you're aware of everything to the point where, you're being competent in looking after people's systems and their data and everything else, I think is a big part of it. They're going to be a lot kinder to you if you can show you're making every conscious effort you can to actually look after things, and you've got an awareness of when things go wrong.
Right. We've been calling it building a defensible position, right?
Exactly. And the ability to be able to see straight up when something's not reachable or something's down, and be able to kind of jump into that and start addressing, okay, so we know this is down, let's report this to someone, let's track this, let's log this, and let's make sure, we're transparent and clear about when we got it back up, when it started, and what effect that may or may not have had on the data that people have been looking at or trying to get to. Because I think that's important in itself. Just being aware of the problem occurring is going to be very favorable in any incidents as they go wrong, which inevitably they will. We've also got reports around this sort of stuff as well. So again, we can say what instances have had the lowest uptime. Where are we seeing instances with regular issues? I mean, luckily these are just a few dev boxes, but if this was production databases, at least we can start to show, okay, we've had a problem, and then over time, have we been able to fix that? Have we improved this and made that better? And we're saving these and send them off as PDFs and keeping a trackable, auditable backlog of information on this. Then we can show that we've improved things, we're aware of the problem, and we've started to take steps to to control that moving forward. So that's I think a massive thing of what people can do to improve that situation there. So I think again, having these reports across in a statewide view. I mean, I showed you the this statewide reporting as well, which is still very much in its infancy, but having the ability to be able to see. Oh, let me just find it again. Redgate. Red. Help if I'm putting in the right website. There we go. So with the statewide thing, I mean, I don't know if everyone's probably not got over it yet with those risky patches that were causing sort of breaches, and obviously all sorts of people have problems just because they weren't aware of old patches on their systems that needed updating. Having this ability to kind of keep on top of that, I think is going to be a big way to prevent those big problems coming forward in the future. And what we will do is we're looking at ways of surfacing this information a bit easier. So not just having to go through this, but also highlighting highlighting in red where there's a version that needs updating, potentially any adverse risks that you might want to be aware of as well, and hopefully just be able to bring that to the forefront of people's minds that there's an issue there, they need to sort that. The other thing as well we're looking at is, at the moment, we're still kind of starting on this GDPR journey too. So we're trying to find ways that we can make this tool integrate better with these compliances. And one of the ways at the moment is, I don't know how many people who use this tool are aware of this, but you can create custom metrics. So anything you can query your databases with T-SQL and return numerical results, you can actually effectively create alerts and metrics for. I'm not a DBA, as you can probably tell, but we do have this custom metric site within the tool, and we will be adding a GDPR section to it where people can obviously find some metrics and some alerts that are going to be relevant to this. But I think, just to give you an idea, there's things like seeing default TCP ports, default user service accounts. We're also looking at pulling in failed logins as well to the tool, so that will also be pulled into the reports. So again, you can track and report all these things that are happening and be aware of it as it's occurring, which is, I think, like I keep banging the drum on, part of the problem and part of the way we want to help people deal with this. And again, lastly, sorry, jumping around a little bit here, but with regards to the deployments, obviously we have started pulling this into the tool. The other thing to point out with this as well is that people should really be source controlling their databases. If they're not doing that already, then they should be slightly worried, because having that version control of the database and all the changes that are being made creates again this auditable trail. People can see who's changed what, when, why, and obviously again we track that in the tool. So every time someone's made a deployment, we can see that that's happened, and therefore find these problems quicker than we might do otherwise. Trying to fumble around in the darkness because someone's made a hotfix change to production. Adding that to your processes and making that part of cementing that into your processes even is something everyone really should be doing. If they're not doing it, they really should think about how they're going to get that implemented, because I think that would be a big thing going forward, again, from their defense perspective, if nothing else.
Oh yeah, no arguments from me. I mean, it's so important once we start automating everything, especially when we start automating deployments, getting things out the door. We need to know when things changed, right? What they were, how they, it's just, without that knowledge, then as you say, you're just stabbing in the dark, and that's horrible.
Absolutely. I mean, even actually, I don't know if I haven't shown this yet, but it's a slightly different side of things. But if you've got a change with regards to a query, so if the query plan's changed over time, I'm just going to open this out a little bit further. I can even see there where a query plan has changed over the whole duration of its history and how it's grown, and all these little dots represent a changed query plan. So all these things point me in the right direction of where something's gone wrong or been altered. So I think it's really important.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, I'll stop waffling now.
I don't think I've seen that one before. I didn't know that was there.
Oh, I tell you, they're adding stuff all the time. It's literally every time I do a demo, I'm like, oh, that's new. Where did that come from?
Cool. Thank you.
So I'll hand back over to you, Grant. I mean, I guess this is a good point for anyone out there who's watching to ask us any questions. We've got a few minutes left.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple of wrap-up slides, but then other than that, it's Q&A time. You want to switch it back over?
Yeah, let me just do that now.
All right, let's show my screen. Now, before you guys go, I mean, every time we say Q&A, people start to run. Before you go, if you have questions, one, you can download Monitor and try it out yourself. Two, get in touch with us, SQLmonitor@redgate.com. Also, since this is the #3 issue, privacy and protection, May 18th in London, we've got the Redgate SQL Privacy Summit, first one we've ever done. You can get 15% off if you go to redgate.com/discount. You guys are getting a special deal, so please take advantage of it and use it. Other than that, I would like to open up the floor for any kind of questions you guys have. Again, there's a questions pane right there. It's been used once already. And if you've got any kind of questions on monitoring, on SQL Monitor, on SQL Server, Azure Managed Instance, Azure SQL Database, we are here to try to help you guys out. So type. Or we'll wrap it up and head on out, one or the other.
Let's see if anyone comes up with anything.
Okay, cool.
Surely.
So first question: Can Redgate monitor? Can Redgate monitor a database in SQL Express?
Yeah, we have no problem with monitoring SQL Express. Obviously, the data you'd expect to get from SQL Express is what we get available, so that's what we're monitoring. But yeah, absolutely, and I think there's also an importance to monitoring Express because obviously the limitations means that performance does need to be that little bit more on point, and especially keeping an eye on the disk space and everything else as it grows, I think is important there too. So yeah, absolutely.
Right, and then the next question, follow up on that is can our monitoring database be on SQL Express?
So yeah, we wouldn't necessarily recommend it again because of the limits.
Right.
But if you've got a small environment, and some people do, then that's absolutely fine, and we'll handle it. It's just you have to be a bit more careful, I guess, with how much data you keep and making sure you keep on top of the purge settings, which is easy enough to do.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm letting you answer these just so that I can validate my knowledge because I actually knew the answers, but making you talk. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't quite understand the next question. Can we find the live query session from SQL Monitor? You mean can you see queries that are actively executing? Is that what he means? James, can we see queries that are actively executing inside of Monitor?
So I guess with the long running queries, if it's an active query, I'm pretty sure I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it will turn up in that long running query. We do also show the blocking processes as well, any blocked processes. So if there's anything that's an active block, then we do also show that now as well.
Right. Now, next question is can we download the report? You've got that nice reporting stuff. Can you spit it out in PDF or Excel?
So you can spit it out in PDF. You can even automate it to send it out at certain times of the day to certain people, different reports. So you can sit there and read it with your coffee every morning.
Right. Now, next thing is, can you give an example of the change tracking feature and how it works? Changes in our environment are generally introduced by our application vendor.
Oh, so let me get this straight. The changes are made by the application vendor, so they're probably not using our tools. Therefore, it wouldn't show up in the symbol on the overview like we do.
So, I mean, just to directly answer that question, what we're doing is we're using some of the Redgate deployment tooling around database lifecycle management, DevOps, that kind of thing, and we are recording markers on the databases in a way that the monitor can pick it up, and so when we will know that deployments occurred. And so it's very much we're focusing on our own stuff that way. But you guys could build something similar, but it won't show up in Monitor in the same way.
Obviously, ideally, you just get tool belts and or get them tool belts, and
yeah,
then you can see it.
Is there any impact on performance on monitored servers? Can I take this one?
You can.
Yeah, of course there is, right? There's nothing is free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's always an impact, but the impact we make is very, very minimal, and we are working all the time to make it more so. We're very careful about that. We use an agentless system, so we're using up as little as possible. We run some queries, some WMI queries, but we are trying as much as possible to keep that observer overhead as low as we can. But there's no way in the world that's going to be zero. No monitoring tool is zero. Any monitoring tool that says they are zero is lying to you, flat out. I won't get into details, but I know one monitoring tool that says that, and it's not true. Everyone, when they monitor, it causes impact on the system. All right, next question. What is license policy for the tool? Oh, okay, that one's definitely yours. Can monitor be used to monitor remote instances, and how many? That's on you,
Yes.
babe.
So we license on a per server basis. So if you've got multiple instances on one server, you can get it all for one license. But if you have 10 servers, you'd need 10 licenses, etc. But yeah, you mentioned remote as well. So if they're remote
Yeah.
instances, yeah, no problem at all. Again, we're agent free as long as we can get a connection to those servers.
Right. We
We
have
can
to be able to
monitor them for you.
query the servers. That's the one. That's the only thing.
Exactly. I mean, people do have lots of global networks, and we do monitor those quite
Right.
comfortably.
What's the retention period for monitored data? I'll let you answer this one. It's a fun
Yeah,
answer.
yeah, it's entirely up to you, I guess is the answer. Is how long do you want to keep it for? Obviously, the longer you keep the data for, the bigger your database is going to be. So that's one thing you've got to take into account. But yeah, we have very customizable purge settings, so you can keep certain data for longer periods than others, for example.
And the default right now is how long?
I think it comes out of the box at 2 months for most of it, and then
Right.
2 weeks for certain parts of it.
Yeah. 60 days for a lot of it, right? By default, but you can adjust that. Just found the estate page in our SQL Monitor via the URL.
Yeah.
Where can I find a list of any other preview features that I might not be aware of? Great
Oh,
question.
that is a great question because this is a question I have for the guys all the time as well. That new feature, when am I going to see it? So I guess on our webpage we've got the roadmap under Redgate / products DBA SQL Monitor, but also in the support pages there as well. We do have a list of release notes. I don't know if we can share these on here somehow, Grant, but yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't. No, I'm not going to. If I do it, I'm going to screw up. So I'm going to say no. Listen to what he said, because
They're
I'll
available
mess
on the
that up.
website. I mean, I guess the key thing with us is we have an agile development team. We've got 2 development teams on this tool, and they are constantly working on new features. That's a kind of hidden one because we're working on it still. It's not that pretty, but it will get
Right.
prettier.
Cool.
Um,
So here's a question, and I know I already know the answer, but I'll let you answer it too. How often does the monitor hit the monitor databases?
Also, now Grant, you probably can correct me on this one, but I think it's every 13 seconds it polls it.
Yeah, and well, but it also depends on what part of the monitor we're talking about. We don't pull everything every time. Again, in an attempt to keep um, keep our load as low as possible, we don't run every query all the time. They're staggered off depending on a whole bunch of stuff, decisions made, and in the code. But you already got the basic.
I think it's important to add there is a config file which enables you to tweak things. I mean, I know where some people have had very sort of network bandwidth has been a big concern. They've just tuned down those polling frequencies a little bit as well, just to make it easier to manage those point of sale systems. So there's configuration that can be done there too.
Right. Now, another question, and I honestly don't know this one, so I'm hoping you have an answer. Can we provide an option for filtering or searching the SQL Server instance name in SQL Monitor?
So is that I'm going to take this as a guess in the overview. You want to
Yeah.
search for the instance. Yeah, so that's a really good question because
I mean,
this came up
change
in
it.
a customer call, and you
Okay.
can actually there's a little box on the right hand side with a magnifying glass, and if you click
Here,
on that and you start typing.
I just
uh,
handed over to you. Can you show that real
ah
quick?
yeah, sure, it'd be my pleasure. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So just up here on the right hand side, if I start to type cluster, that will bring up my clusters.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that was there either. I love these
Yeah.
things where I get to see stuff.
One of our developers actually did that in an hour after talking to a customer. They said it'd be really handy if you could do that. So he went away and did it. It was released the next day.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you. That was great. All right, so we are up on the hour, and I don't see any other questions at the moment. Our timing is impeccable.
That is almost too good timing.
Yeah, it is almost too good timing. So I'm just going to say thank you, everyone. Thank you, James. I learned stuff today that I didn't think I was going to learn, so I'm really excited. Hopefully, you guys found this useful. we're very excited about the survey. I'm sure we're going to be doing it more, and we will probably be releasing more data from it at some point in the future. So please keep an eye on us, and we're going to be doing more fun stuff. James, you got anything else to add?
No, just thank you very much for sort of sticking with us, and I hope that was useful. But again, any questions, please, any more sort of tailored demos or anything like that, well, we're both always happy to help. So, just get in contact.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Cool. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.